Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Our guest today, Amy McNally. Amy, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for coming on. And can you tell us, first of all, where you're calling in from and what you do for a living with HYDR8 US?
So I'm calling in from San Diego, sunny San Diego, California. And
Awesome.
I am the founder and CEO of HYDR8 US, which is a beverage company that proudly supports US veterans.
It's amazing. I love that. And can you tell me a little bit more about your background? What kind of got you wanting to be in this space? And what was kind of something you noticed out there in the market that you're trying to do a little bit different or better with this brand?
Well, so for the last several years, I had worked in an OTC beverage and bottling plant, and I became very familiar with the underpinnings of the beverage space and what was lacking. But I also knew that I wanted to do something that was coupling a passion project. My father was in the United States. He was a military aviator for 28 years. And I saw firsthand the service and sacrifice that he made and also many others make for our country. So fortunately, the Gary Sinise Foundation agreed to allow us to support them. They do really incredible work on behalf of veterans all across the country and their families and first responders. And so I decided to develop also a premium beverage, especially bottled water that's domestically sourced, because it doesn't make sense that we are importing water from the South Pacific for artesian water, especially when we have really incredible untapped aquifers here in the United States. So that's what I'm doing.
That's amazing. And I love the why behind your brand. Obviously, I appreciate you doing that. And what did you kind of find? I mean, why do so many companies go to these, outsourced markets, like foreign markets to source these types of waters? And what was your process kind of like in order to do that, through American sources?
Well, so I did a lot of research as far as looking at water reports because I wanted to make sure that we had something that tasted great. I mean, obviously, taste and quality is really important. I mean, there's the exotic nature of bringing something in and having something imported. But I think the nice thing is that we're finally moving now towards embracing domesticity and realizing the made in USA and how that differentiator is really important here from a sourcing standpoint, from a freshness standpoint, a sustainability element too. I mean, it's not being shipped on tankers all the way across the world, which increases our carbon footprint. So it's nice that we can have it here in the United States. I have multiple co-packers across the country that I've vetted to make sure that they have really premium, high quality, great tasting water that we can, rely on consistently, but we also can make sure that they'll be able to handle an evolving and hopefully a blossoming demand for the product as it keeps getting out there.
Now, let me ask you this, with so many CPG founders coming on the podcast, one of the biggest, I would say, like pain points that I find and people talking about is working with distributors, working with co-packers, and, not always at the end of the day having the best relationship going forward, and that those things kind of falling apart at some point can be obviously a huge struggle because that's your whole basically supply chain at the front end, right? So what kind of steps do you take and where do you kind of look for points of diligence when you were looking to work with a co-packer? What were kind of the things on your checklist that you were looking for specifically?
I actually really appreciate that question because it is, I mean, obviously everybody that is in CPG, oftentimes they are facing the same kinds of challenges like you mentioned. And I think one of the things for me is my why is such a huge critical part of the brand that everybody that is involved in the brand either has had a military family member or they are married to somebody even, or they have served themselves. So they're very influenced and the brand really matters to them. And so the money and the things that might come later, those are all secondary to the elements of raising funds and being able to support veterans. So that's one of the things. And then also just doing the due diligence and realizing hey, I would much rather have a smaller profit margin with some distributors and some brokers that I can trust, that are reliable, that have integrity, than have more money and a larger piece with people that aren't those things.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And from what I hear, I mean, it seems to be one of the most important things because, when you have so much volume going out through your, wholesale channels, I mean, obviously, the margins aren't great on those. So it's a volume game at that, with those kinds of things. And, the amount of, especially with distributors, because I mean, working with the co-packers is obviously important. But once you get all that, set, if you're not able to sell it because your distribution plan falls through or your relationship with your, buyer falls through, I mean, you're just basically sitting on, you've spent all this money to get all this inventory and now you can't do anything with it, right? So, and to that point, I wanted to ask you, obviously, with the nature of this product, I would assume you're selling into wholesale, grocery stores, kind of things like that. Is there a direct to consumer element to this as well? And could you kind of give me a breakdown between those two and how much you're doing of each, just so, I guess from a percentage standpoint?
Yeah. So, okay. So we are really a fledgling brand. I mean, we started 2 years ago. We only went to production. We have two different kinds of water. So we have a high pH alkaline, which is a 9.5 to 10 pH. And that goes through the 7-step purification method and then ionized minerals, pretty standard to bring up the pH. But the nice thing is that makes sure that it has a very clean, fresh taste that people are used to. And then the second one is there really isn't a domestic name brand artesian water. And so because of that, I knew, oh, well, I would really like to make sure that I have an offering for Hydrate for that as well. So those are the two things that we have. Hydrate, the alkaline water, was only released a little less than a year ago. So right now, at the moment, we are in about 175 C-stores and independents as we approach water. Yes, and that's the majority of them because the flagship co-packers were on the East Coast. So the majority of those are anywhere from Pennsylvania all the way down to Charleston, South Carolina, and in between. So we're in those stores, and now we're getting ready to have our water reviews with several national retailers. What we're looking at, though, is instead of doing a national rollout on the retailers that are interested, we want to do regional for a couple of reasons. We want to make sure that we can check on the sales velocity. We want to make sure that we put marketing dollars in those areas and targeting those stores so that we can get people in there and so that there's an awareness because this is a brand new brand. And second, or finally, we're very cognizant about our spend. So right now, the unique thing about us is that we are totally family owned and operated. We haven't taken on any investors as of yet. We are starting to speak to people in that regard because of the interest, because we're going to need to be able to have them to float inventory for slotting fees and all of the requisite costs that goes to have a national brand. But at the moment, we are currently, our footprint is really small. We do have, we are on Amazon though for the alkaline water, and our website HYDR8US.com or Go Hydrate, but Hydrate HYDR8 like this. Our website, you can get both of those as well.
Awesome. And then I guess so you're in 175 doors of between independent and other stores that you work with. How much are you doing on the direct to consumer side, whether it's through your Amazon or your website, I guess just from like a percentage of revenue standpoint?
That is relatively small. And I can attribute that to the cost. I mean, I think on our website right now, it's $29.99, and that's not even making a margin because every case that we sell, we do cases of 24 for the 500 milliliter and 12 for the 1 liter, costs 30 pounds. And so in order to ship it, it's just cost prohibitive. So it's about, I'd say 20 to 25% of our revenue at the moment. I'm waiting on doing a lot of optimization and putting a lot of money behind that because quite frankly, I want this water to be something that's premium, but with a price point that's affordable. And so I don't, the $30 for a case, I would much rather somebody to be able to go into their local grocer and pay $19 for it. So we're really hoping that we can grow those in relatively short order in the next 12 to 18 months so that people can buy it at their local retailer as opposed to online.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I know it is very cost prohibitive, especially with drinks, because the liquid itself, it's just so heavy, especially when you get into like I've had a few people on the podcast that do like cold press drinks that don't necessarily have the longest shelf life. So those not only are heavy because they're liquid, but also need to be refrigerated the whole time. So I've definitely heard that before. And it makes sense. And I think that's why, most CPG brands, they do mostly in, in wholesale and retailers and grocery stores, unless, barring, honestly, mostly what I've seen of people who have success selling like mostly D2C with CPG brands, it is really just relying on going like viral on social media. Essentially, is really where it comes from most of the time when I see it. So, but I guess to that point too, What is kind of your general, digital strategy? I mean, obviously you're still trying to drive traffic to the website, get interest, and all those types of things. What kind of things do you have in place right now, as far as like your social medias, or they don't anyway? If you do any paid advertising, what does that kind of look like on the digital marketing side for you?
So that's just starting to emerge. So
Hmm.
again, I cannot thank, and I want to take this moment to thank anybody that's written in to us, anybody that's expressed interest in the brand, because I've had people that are very seasoned in CPG that have been doing it for 20 to 30 years, that have national accounts and that offered to volunteer their time and mentor me and help me get this brand out into the world, because it really does matter to people. Every label has the name of a fallen service person who's died in the line of duty. And when you scan the QR code, it comes up to their page and explains who they were or what their service was and what their life was like. I mean, so it's not just something that the idea of social responsibility because it sounds good and it's trendy. I mean, this brand really matters to people, and it certainly matters to me and my family. I mean, it is, other than my children, it's my priority. So we've been fortunate enough that we've had quite a few professional athletes that have offered to share the brand. And at this point, again, because we aren't taking on any VC funding, I told them if they could wait, but if they would be willing to share it kind of like on a very low key level as an influencer on their social media, just letting people know that they've tried it and that they like it, that would be great. And so the second thing is that if you look, there are a lot of very famous people that have military backgrounds. I mean, people even like Adam Driver that served in the Marines. So my goal is that as this brand becomes more accessible, then that will give me the opportunity to reach out to some of those people. And because I'm waiting on that, because I hate to initiate some really big people and players, but then there's no real place for them to direct them to. So I want to make sure that I have a national footprint. And then I'm hoping that we can get some people that are recognizable faces. In addition to, Gary Sinise and the work that he does, we can share all of that and then say, in addition to this, here are the places that you can go and we can point to them, as opposed to right now where, like I said, it's strictly mainly the website and those smaller stores on the East Coast.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that, obviously. And those partnerships are good. I think could be really powerful for brands like this, just obviously for recognition, but for people who, I mean, seek out, obviously influence and kind of, like want to take over that kind of perspective that people have that are well known, whether they're athletes or whether they're actors or whatever the case might be. So I had no idea Adam Driver was a Marine, though. That's really interesting. You always find that out about like a lot of professional athletes, especially it seems like in the NFL, a lot of military backgrounds with the NFL players, and I'm always surprised. I mean, I don't know why I'm surprised. It just like this is never something that ever comes up until it eventually does. So that's amazing. And I'm just curious, like, have those people like directly reached out to you after finding the product, or have you been kind of actively seeking out those types of partnerships? Or
So for the athletes, I have not reached out to any of them. So and in fact, I did the same thing as I did with you before our call. I'm like, how did you find me? And they're like, oh, we found you on social media. You're starting to get a reputation and people are starting to find it because of the hashtags that I'm using for the posts that I'm doing. And then I've been kind of keeping my finger on the pulse of some of the people, like my aspirational asks, like who would I like to represent the brand that has both a military experience directly, but then also like me, where they call them Navy brats or military brats, which are kids of military service people, because those like the entire family is a service family. When one member serves, an entire family does. And so that gives a really unique voice to people. And so, as we all know, recognizable faces sell things. And so if a recognizable face is like, this water is great, that's wonderful, because then we'll be able to have the funding to help veterans. But secondarily, and what I think even more importantly, it's like, hey, the military is important. It's not just a one party thing. I've had a lot of people that have made the assumption that my politics are one way or the other based primarily on the fact that it's a patriotic brand, which I think is unfortunate, because I'm like, the whole country should be a patriotic brand. Like everything should be patriotic, And so I'm really proud that people are looking at this and seeing this and reaching out. In fact, I had an athlete just recently that plays for the NBA, and he's relatively well known as an emerging athlete I believe his father was Air Force and mother was Army, or maybe inverse. And he would like to be the face of, one of the faces of the brand. And so it's a very honoring thing to have when people like that are interested in something that I've been putting my, blood, sweat, and tears into.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I'm curious, like, obviously you want to wait maybe to get around to funding so that you can fulfill like the millions of orders that are going to come through as soon as somebody with that sort of pedigree, puts it out in the public eye through their socials or whatever it is. But I'm curious, you kind of use these like conversations and connections that you have when you do talk to, maybe like VC funding people, and to say like, hey, like I have these things. Like, do you kind of use that as a as kind of like a proof of concept or anything when you're going and having those conversations? That's another obviously big pain point when CPG brands that I talk to is it's always like, funding has been a little bit more difficult to get maybe than 4 or 5 years ago. So I think anyways, you can kind of, get savvy with your, what you bring to the table, and looking for that VC, I think is really interesting and something I think would be really helpful to people. So I'm just curious if you've been able to leverage that in those conversations.
I haven't yet, just because we're so early, but I do plan. And to your point, yes, the landscape with VC funding has changed in the last 5 years. I mean, people aren't as eager to do really early rounds and for brands that are emerging. They usually wait until much later, where it's a little bit less of a risk. And so being able to say, hey, these are the people that are willing and that are kind of in the stable waiting to come out and support and promote the brand as soon as we have funding in order to do so, I think will certainly do great things. I mean, I think that, coupled with the fact that we are I got through the Small Business Association, I got certified as a woman-owned small business, because a lot of these retailers, as we know, have diversity initiatives, which I'm finding even now still, I can understand why when I'm in certain meetings and I am excluded from the conversation, and I'm like, so this is why they still have the need for diversity. And so having that, the green logistics, the sustainability piece, the helping veterans, I really feel like this made in the USA and artesian water for one of them. I just feel like it's the secret sauce. And a lot of people are looking for and care about brands that they can feel passionately about too. And so every person that's reached out to me, that's asked me, by the time that we have a conversation and it's over, they're as excited about the brand as I am, which is it's a wonderful position to be in.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I love that. And Amy, one question I always love to ask everybody that comes on the podcast. I know you're only 2 years into this venture, but even still, surely you've learned a ton along that way, like even just in your first couple of years. So if you could go back when you were still like in the idea phase of this company and brand, if you could give yourself any one piece of advice, if you could go back and start the business again, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
It's a great question. I think I would say don't be so quick to make decisions. Like, sometimes it's better to be a little bit more thoughtful. And there were a couple of co-packers that I jumped into bed with and made, arrangements with, and I prepaid for things, and they ended up going away. And so there was a loss of thousands of dollars. And so I think making sure that just being as diligent as possible too, with vetting, checking references. I mean, even for things that seem like this is just a typical relationship, this is just a co-packer, it's very straightforward. Everything is a relationship that I think that for me now, that I would ask someone else, like, oh, okay, who are your references? What brands do you represent? And that way I can go to them too. And the second thing is I think I just continue to listen more than I talk, because there are so many people that have been doing it for decades, and they have so much information and so much knowledge. And especially the ones now that are like, hey, we're going to support you and help you. I think just continuing to listen to them and let them tell me and guide me, because like my dad retired after being the commanding officer of the Dwight D. Eisenhower aircraft carrier. So that was, at the time, I don't even think there were women on it. So it was like 4,000 men. And I asked him once, I was like, wow, you are amazing. I don't even know how you did that. I couldn't do that, like be the mayor of a city essentially. And he said, you surround yourself with people that you can trust, and that they each know their facet of what they're supposed to do, and you can delegate things to them. And I think just continuing to be able to do that. In the beginning, I tried to do it all. And I wish now that I had sought counsel and got more feedback and things like that.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that advice because one of the things I try to bring to the table with this podcast is perspective is exactly like that because I feel like if you're just from the outside looking in, you're not having like conversations with a lot of other entrepreneurs trying to be a new entrepreneur yourself. All you really see is what you see on social media, that everything looks like overnight success. Everybody just talks about how much money they made in the last month. And it can kind of just look like, it can seem like you're always behind or you're not moving fast enough or growing fast enough if all you see is just what's put out there in the media, whether it's social media or whatever the case might be. So I appreciate a very realistic perspective here of no, we made mistakes. We got into a bad relationship at first. We overcame it. Now it's better. But if I could go back, I would say just be a little bit more diligent with those relationships, like we kind of talked about already. It's really, really important, and it's something I hear, as an answer to that question quite often. So I think it's worth repeating over and over again. If anybody listens to the podcast regularly, it's you'll hear that time and time again. I think that's one of probably, if somebody asked me like what did I learn about CPG from doing this podcast for 100 episodes, that would probably be my number one thing. So I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that too. Yeah, and then Amy, I just want to give you a quick opportunity just to shout out your website, your social medias, anywhere anybody can stay in touch with you if they're interested in maybe a potential business partnership or just want to place an order, maybe check it out. What's the best way to stay in touch with you all?
Great. Okay. So our website is Hydrate, HYDR, the number 8, US.com. And if you want to email me too, if you have any questions, or if you are, like you said, if you're interested, it's just Amy, AMY at HYDR8US.com. And we are on Amazon. Our website, our Go Hydrate is our handle for Twitter, and then Hydrate USA is on Instagram. I mean, we're on all the usual places, on all the usual channels, but we really are looking forward to growing. So if the nice thing is too, is people that are willing to join hands and help us now, I firmly believe in loyalty. And so, those people and those relationships are going to be the pillars that keep this brand, hopefully that prop it up, stand it up, and keep it going forever. And those are going to be the ones that really matter, especially to me. So I'm looking forward to working with people. I thank you so much for giving me time today, because it is a new brand. And even though I've been working hard at it, and 2 years is not a long time, but it's a lot of time and a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of hours that have gone into it. And I really look forward to getting it into the hands of people across the country so that we really can help veterans and their families in a meaningful way, because that's a really small piece to give. They're the ones that are out there really doing it. They're the ones that are out there that are heroes every single day. And so it's a very small thing for me to produce a high quality, premium, affordable water that will support them in return.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Amy. I love everything you're doing. I just want to wish you the best of luck and continued success in all you're doing. I think it's really important. And yeah, I really look forward to staying in touch as well. And I just want to say thank you again for coming on. And thank you to Wolfie as well.
I was just going to say, yes, thank you for allowing her to bark and to photobomb it for a little bit.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's more than welcome all the time. Thank you, Wolfie. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.